Hello and welcome to the Fragrance Report, a podcast where we discuss all things fragrance. I'm your host, Anya, and I'm so excited about this particular episode because we are going to be discussing a bunch of things from some favorites, new items in my collection, and finally, we are back to doing fragrance history podcast episodes. We took a bit of a hiatus from doing this topic over the last few weeks, but we're back and we're starting off with a really interesting episode or topic on fragrance history in the ancient world. We're going to be focusing on ancient Rome. The research for this episode was quite interesting because the Romans did some weird stuff when it came to their fragrances. So we're going to be talking about that. But if this is your first time listening to this podcast and you don't know my face or my voice, hello, my name is Anya. I love fragrances. I post content on YouTube primarily. I'm there 5 times a week. And I also publish content on other social media platforms as well under the username ANECHKAFRAGRANCES. I started this podcast as a way for us to explore some other topics related to fragrance without focusing so much on consumerism, which I think is a byproduct of a lot of what we see online. I started this podcast to really focus on topics like fragrance history, really diving deep into trends, analysis of the industry, things like that. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely do consider supporting this podcast. I publish a new episode every Wednesday, and I also publish video versions of this podcast episode on YouTube as well. But even if you're on Spotify, you can actually watch the video version of this episode too. Alright, so let's get into fragrance favorites. I also have some new additions to my collection, which I'm excited to share with you. First up is this J.U.S fragrance. This is J.U.S Spritz Love. I have had this perfume on my wish list for quite some time now. I wasn't too sure if I should get it or not because this is a very bitter orange perfume. And it's inspired by the smell of spritz, like an alcoholic spritz, a Campari spritz, Aperol spritz, and this perfume really captures that smell in a bottle perfectly. This has a really prominent note of bitter orange at the top, but that note stays throughout the longevity of this fragrance. There's also, I think, oud in the base. I don't really smell that oud, but I do think this is a really beautiful fragrance if you want to mimic the smell of an Aperol spritz in a perfume. Another fast favorite of mine has been by Sora Dora. This is Johnny. You might already know this fragrance. It's been really hyped up, especially around the holiday season. This was on a lot of people's radar, and it's a really beautiful photorealistic apple tart smell. It smells exactly like a caramelized apple tart. It smells so good. It's an ultimate gourmand winter perfume. So this fragrance has notes of baked apple, puff pastry, cinnamon, vanilla, caramel, nutty notes, almond, apricot, peach, plum, osmanthus, and white musk. This perfume smells so interesting because it doesn't just smell like caramel and apple, and they could have just gone that route, but this perfume has the added complexity of literally smelling doughy. You can definitely smell the dough of the apple tart. It's so photorealistic, very interesting. I love it when gourmands, or rather photorealistic gourmands like these, really do explore that doughy accord. I think it makes it even more intriguing and interesting to actually wear the fragrance when it is that photorealistic. So Johnny is definitely a fragrance I would recommend getting your nose on. Both J.U.S and Sora Dora do have discovery sets available on their website, and if you'd like to opt in for my discount code, Anya10, you're most welcome to use that code. That is an affiliate code, but I do recommend using that code on the discovery sets so you're able to really experience all the fragrances they have to offer. Some other old favorites of mine include the fragrance I'm actually wearing today. This is Salvo Gris by Experimental Perfume Club. This is essentially a spicy fragrance with some brightness added in the form of pink pepper, notes like turmeric, ginger. It's a really beautiful and compelling fragrance. There's also a leather note in here, but to my nose, it comes off smelling as a suede leather instead of a straight up leather note. It's so beautiful. It's like one of those effortlessly elegant perfumes. I've been loving Salvo Gris for a long time, but recently I just stopped wearing it as much, but I'm very happy to report this was the week I finally got back to using this fragrance, and it is one of my firm favorites. And I think I've been talking about this fragrance for several weeks now, but Bloody Wood has definitely been still a firm favorite of mine. I like to talk about the fragrances I am wearing constantly because I want to give you guys an idea as to what I'm wearing on a regular basis. And for me, Bloody Wood has remained a constant in my rotation. This is a stunning wine, cherry, raspberry, rose perfume with violet, which adds a really beautiful, elegant quality to it. It's a stunning perfume, and if you're watching the video version of this podcast, you can definitely see I have made quite the dent. Another perfume I've been enjoying is Commodities Gin. This is a stunning fragrance. It's a really photorealistic play on the juniper note with the gin, and I've just been loving this. I've been spraying it on a lot. It's a really easy fragrance to wear, and I especially love wearing it as a hair perfume because then it does stay around me in this bubble, which I really do love. And then this is another perfume that I've just been reintroducing into my rotation. I have a decant of this. This is from Reinvented. This is called Ethereal Soul. And to be quite honest with you, I do want to add this perfume to my collection in its full bottle form. It's a really compelling cherry fragrance. It's a cherry perfume done right. A lot of cherry fragrances end up smelling the same to each other. This is a perfume that really smells like cherry syrup, but not in like a medical way. This just smells like a rich, luxurious, syrupy cherry, and it does last a really long time, and it smells absolutely amazing. There's an added note of plum in here, which I think really plays off well with the cherry, and this perfume is quite frankly beast mode. So I've been wearing my travel spray a lot, and I've been loving it. And this is a perfume that I definitely do think I'll be getting a full-size bottle of because I've just been obsessed with the scent, and it's a really unique play on the cherry note. And you guys know how picky I am when it comes to cherry fragrances. This week we're talking about perfumery in ancient Rome. A few weeks ago we talked about perfumery in ancient Egypt, particularly talking about Cleopatra's love for fragrance, and a lot of you expressed some interest in exploring other parts of the ancient world, which is why we're doing Rome. And it's interesting because there are some parallels that I found in between the two topics. But there are a lot of things that are very unique to ancient Romans specifically that I was really surprised to find out about during my research, and I think you guys will find very intriguing as well. So let's get on into it. To set the stage, the Romans were heavily influenced by the ancient Greeks and the ancient Egyptians when it came to perfumery. And we are going to explore ancient Greeks in a future episode, but they really had perfume permeate every aspect of their life, from involving it in religious rituals, cleanliness, and even in the gladiators' arena. And perfumes permeated every aspect of life, from religious ceremonies, personal grooming, the battlefield, and even the gladiatorial arena. The perfumes that ancient Romans used were actually oil-based, so they would use olive oil or almond oil as a base for their fragrances. The Romans also made use of their vast empire by importing different ingredients such as flowers, spices, and resins from other parts of the empire. For example, roses were imported from Egypt, frankincense was imported from Arabia, and cinnamon came from India. They had a lot of vast and interconnected trade networks, which ensured that these materials were in ready supply. The Romans were incredibly concerned with personal hygiene, and this value went hand in hand with their use of perfumes. Bathing was a daily ritual for the Romans, especially when it came to the wealthy ruling class. Public baths, or therma, were essential to Roman life, and these grand facilities weren't just places to clean yourself, it was a way for them to socialize amongst themselves on a regular basis. People would use these grand facilities to exercise, socialize, and even conduct business on a regular basis, and after bathing, they would cover themselves in scented oil. A high emphasis on cleanliness in Rome as a moral virtue. If you were well groomed, it was considered that you were disciplined, you were of a high moral standing, and it was generally considered acceptable by society to pay attention to cleanliness and grooming. Let's just say you were a poor Roman who couldn't necessarily afford to spend hours or even the entire day at the public baths. You would then use perfume and scented oils to mask the natural smell of body odor. Fragrance was an opportunity for normal Romans, for working class Romans, to bridge the gap between the social economic classes. I do want to take some time to talk about some famous Romans and their obsession with perfume and the specific perfume ingredients that they are thought to have used. So let's first talk about Julius Caesar. He was known as a sharp dresser and a meticulous groomer, and he used perfume as part of his personal branding. He favored smells like frankincense and myrrh, which which added to his authority and divine purpose. And these resins were often burned in temples, so smelling like them made Caesar seem more divine. Also, Empress Poppaea Sabina, who was the wife of Emperor Nero, was all about luxury. She was infamous for her extravagant beauty routines. She reportedly bathed in donkey milk scented with rose oil, and this was thought to maintain her radiant skin. And Nero, who was obsessed with her, even threw parties for her where rose petals were rained down from the ceiling. Her favorite scent was the rose scent, and her obsession with this note influenced Roman perfumery for years to come. Now let's turn our attention to gladiators, and this is where things get really interesting. So as we all know, the gladiators were a central part in Roman culture. In Roman daily life, they were known as essentially the entertainment. People would go to the games all the time where gladiators would fight to the death, be it amongst themselves or with predatory animals, things like that. It was brutal, but gladiators were seen as essentially pop culture icons in Roman day-to-day life. If you were a gladiator and you were about to go into the arena to fight, they would often cover your body in oil. This would not only help you look a little bit better, but this would also help protect your skin. They used oils like cedarwood and patchouli to help project that aura of strength and power. But what's really interesting is after the game, if you were the winning gladiator, they would collect your sweat. I am not kidding. They would scrape your sweat off and collect it because it was considered to have aphrodisiac properties. So their sweat was called unguentum gladiatorium, or gladiator oil, and this was sold as an aphrodisiac. So you could mix it in with perfume, and then it would then be sold as an aphrodisiac, and it was very popular amongst wealthy Roman women. They would mix it in with other perfume oils, or even Roman men would wear gladiator oil to make themselves seem more powerful. So that's kind of insane. It kind of makes me think of modern day pheromones, but it's interesting to note that we've been doing this sort of ludicrous tomfoolery for hundreds or even thousands of years, it looks like. But yeah, it was considered to have seductive medicinal properties to mix the gladiator sweat of the winning gladiator into your daily perfume ritual. So even in death, fallen warriors were then also associated with perfume. So if you were a fallen warrior, you were then anointed with scented oil during your funeral, and this is a ritual that reinforced your hero status. Also, perfume had a very critical role in religion for gladiators, so incense and oils were used in religious rituals in the temples, and the temples were also filled with scents of frankincense and myrrh, which was considered very precious, very divine, and associated with religion. But yeah, based on all this information, we can definitely conclude that perfume played a critical role in ancient Romans' daily lives, from social to hygienic purposes, and even the gladiator. The information about the gladiators was definitely interesting to look up. But I hope you found this episode interesting. Let me know if you want to see any other specific topics in upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye. This episode's music was brought to you by Kevin McLeod over at Incompetech. This is Beauty Flow by Kevin McLeod at Incompetech.com and is licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license.